Sankyu-san. Jula Alma. Sankyu-san. Jula Lucy. Alma Haikou. Test. Sankyu-san. ¿Cómo estás? ¿Qué tal tu día?
Estoy lista para atacar a la gente. Con mi arte.
Sankyu-san. XDDD. Sankyu-san. Yo ahora estoy haciendo el cuervo aventurero que tenía apuntado en la libreta. Nickbot. Visita mi tienda, siempre envío gratis a cualquier parte y regalito incluido, link.
¿Cómo era tu cuervo aventurero? Están dormiditos, así que vamos a hablar un poco bajito. No tengo intención de hacer ASMR, pero si con que me escuchéis bien me vale. Tengo personitas para atacar. Te los paso todos por privado y así los ves. Parece que puedo atacar a los de mi mismo equipo, pero no estoy segura.
Sankyu-san. Vas a pelear con todos esos. Sankyu-san. XDDD.
Lo voy a intentar.
Sankyu-san. Todos al mismo tiempo tendrás que ser Saatama para ganarles de un golpe.
Les voy a destrozar la vida y no lo van a ver ni venir. Ya verás.
Sankyu-san. Espera, que se escucha bajito que has dicho.
Que les voy a destrozar la vida y no lo van a ver ni venir. No me van a ver venir.
Sankyu-san. XDDDDD. Jeremy Rich. Love your art.
Thanks. I'm I'm participating in the art fight. It's like a big event. Once a year, artists fight each other doing drawings of the OCs. So I'm drawing an OC of Anto's art right now. And my family is taking a nap. So I'm speaking. I'm not louder right now because they are sleeping. It's nap time here in Spain. Oh, by the way, I'm a VTuber. I'm a dragon from the Iberic Peninsula, from the Spanish mythology, and I usually do streams on YouTube and Twitch, doing WoW or playing video games. Nice to meet you. This is so complicated. Something like this.
Jeremy Rich. I have never been to Spain. Is it pretty?
Yes, it is. I'm not from the north of Spain, but kinda. I'm from a land called Castilla, and we have so many castles. It's like if you travel to ancient times, medieval times. I really love it. Now we are in summer and it's really hot here. And in summer it's really typical to take naps. So all people are sleeping right now.
Jeremy Rich. Cool.
Yes. Oh, where are you from? If I can ask.
GTG.
GTG. What GTG or GTG games? Good time. Good. Sorry, I'm trying to practice my English, but it's not really good. Sorry about my English. Okay. We ¿Te has puesto alarma?
Sí, son alarma.
My brother just get up from the nap. Oof. He's in the coat, behind blankets. So I see the blankets move, and a big boy emerge from behind. It's a really huge person. Okay. Oh, I was looking for videos to play in a stream, so we are gonna watch some art videos for improve the art.
Easily make them in about 10 minutes. A lot of techniques most artists show you are good on their own, but they're not really meant for beginners. Most of them expect you to already know exactly how the final drawing should look, which can be really hard to do. But after spending weeks trying different strategies,
Yes.
I landed on a method that gives you perfect looking hands every time. And this will work for any character, no matter the proportions, age, or gender. So for our first step, most artists would usually start off saying, oh, first you gotta make a guideline for your hand using sticks and balls and shit. But there is something super important
I'm going to save
that will instantly make your hand
the drawing.
when it comes comes to drawing anything in general, there are like 50 things that will decide if it's even gonna look good at all. From posing, to shape language, to its form. And for a beginner, it is fucking difficult to envision all of this at the same time. So we need something we can look at and easily adjust to make sure everything looks good. Looking up random images online is fine, but it can be very time consuming to find specific references. And 3D models, in my opinion, can be a pain in the fucking ass to work with. That is so easy and flexible, I don't really understand why more artists don't do this. Before you start drawing, record a video of yourself playing around with different hand gestures. Try overlapping your fingers, turning them into arcs, or playing around with depth by pointing some fingers towards or away from the camera. Once you've got a good amount of footage, go through the video and screenshot the poses that stand out to you. And don't worry if your hand shape doesn't match the characters exactly, because we're going to use this picture simply as a guide to help us draw the perfect, most dynamic looking hand. For step 2, since we actually have a reference now,
Okay.
use a completely different approach. The first thing I want you to do is look at your reference.
I want a specific thing, and I think I have it here.
Rather than trying to understand what's wrong with something that looks like this, using your sketch brush, start by drawing simple, disjointed lines to replicate the outline of your reference. Try to make a line for each major bump and curve you notice in your hand. Doing this method makes it easier to adjust your proportions based on your character's body type because of how everything is represented as a simple line. For example, if you need a masculine hand, look to use straighter, rigid lines or use a liquefy tool to make your fingers wider and vice versa for feminine hands. Look to use curved, smooth lines and make your fingers longer. If you need your hands to look older, have the lines at each joint of the finger curve inward.
Okay. I have pretty hand.
Is to understand how you can manipulate each line to express the body type that you need. Once you're happy with your outline, we can now move on to drawing the inside of our sketch. To make this process easier, understand that this idea of drawing the outline first can apply to literally anything that you sketch. For example, if you have fingers that are grouped up inside of your hand, draw their overall shape the same way you just did previously, and then add the lines to separate them. Why do you think beginners are always drawing the two middle fingers together? Because it's easier. That's exact.
It's pretty. I really like to put the two fingers together because that makes a pretty shape on the drawing.
The same idea here. One last thing before moving on, there might be a point where your hand looks a little flat, so there are some easy things we can do to add more volume to our hand. The first and easiest way is just to replicate the creases of your hand. This isn't that important for now since we're going to be coloring these instead, but just so it looks more 3D, it's nice to add them in now. The second and one of the best ways is to draw the nails in your sketch. Nails convey where the
This,
your fingers are.
something like this.
Focus specifically on curving the bottom and top of the nails to follow the cylindrical form of your finger, and the sides of the nail should face where the finger is pointing at. As you can see, adding the nail helps a lot with adding visual clarity to your hand, since you can easily recognize each finger's orientation and position. Line art, oh line art. How much I fucking hate. Okay, honestly, it's not as bad as it seems. As long as the original sketch
It's as bad as we've seen.
I have a really good method that might even boost your line art skills. Like I've said before, the overall shape of the hand is super important to keep intact. So using a soft line art brush, which you can find in my Patreon by the way, start by line arting the outline. When trying to adjust your drawing technique based on the type of hand you want to create. What I mean by that is for younger hands, I like to draw quick, smooth lines to make my hand look smooth. For older hands, I usually draw my lines a little slower so that I can get a nice, wobbly, rigid feel for my hand. Be sure to press down hard when outlining. The hand's shape should be bold and the first thing that people notice. After you're done, you can go back and add some line weight. A rule of thumb that I have is that I like to add weight where 2 different Using an eraser is also really smart for getting rid of weight if you want to add more variety. The next thing we need to do is then line art the inside of our hand. For this part, use the same technique you've been using for the outline, but press lightly this time. This creates a nice contrast in our art that makes the line art feel more dynamic. For the line weight inside the hand, I actually like to do something a little interesting. So I like to find where the absolute darkest parts of my reference is and fill it with line art and then blur it.
Oh my gosh.
Basically kind of like shading, but with the line art instead. This lets the line art blend in nicely with my coloring, which I find super nice. I also like to erase the line art in places where a finger might be pressing against another finger. As for the nails, I like to bold the tip of them and erase the bottom part of it while having the sides be
Okay.
After you have the line art done, it might look a little too rough, and this can happen if you line art it with black. Line arting with black isn't a bad thing, but I personally feel like it makes my line art look a little weird, so we can add a little makeup to fix it. Pick a color that is close to the skin color you're planning to make your hand, take an airbrush tool, and just color around the inside of your hand. This will make your line art look a lot softer. One last thing, I just like to randomly blur some parts of the line art because it just makes it blend nicer with the coloring we're going to do later. Before we move on to step 4, if you would like to try and replicate any of the hands shown in this tutorial, you can download their original file on my Patreon. You can see the color, outline, and sketches separately so you can learn each step better. You can also look to improve your line art by lining the sketches for yourself, or improve your coloring by using the professional level line art included. After we're done with the line art, we can now move on to the next step. So one of the biggest struggles beginners have with hands is coloring and shading. The most common example is people doing this sort of pillow shading, which can look very flat, and this usually stems from people's misunderstanding of what the purpose of shading is. A lot of people think the most important part about shading is conveying where the light source is, which is completely wrong. The purpose of shading is to literally just convey what the object is structured like. Let's take a simple cube for example. As long as
Its volume. Make it looks like more scenery.
Regardless of how random the colors seem to be. And this is how you should be thinking about coloring a hand. Take your reference image, turn it into grayscale, and now as best as you can, separate these shapes into separate shapes. These shapes represent the different faces of your hand, just like the faces of a cube. So using your chosen skin color palette and a marker brush tool, try to replicate these 2D shapes onto the hand that you've created. The placement doesn't have to be perfect. Like I've said before, as long as it's placed in the same relative spot, you should be fine. And don't be afraid to change these shapes based on the body type of your hand. If you want it to look older, stronger, or more masculine, try to use sharper shapes like triangles or squares. If you want it to be younger, softer, or more feminine, try using rounder shapes. After we defined all of the different faces of our hand, now we can do different easy as hell techniques to refine everything that we've had so far, and turn this polygon-ass model into an actual hand. Like we've mentioned before, the main goal of shading is to convey the structure of our hand. So this time we have to show that our hand is a soft thing that we can squish. One of the most important concepts in the build of a rendered object is to have a balance between soft and hard shading. Using a color tool and blurring only the middle of the shapes we've created and leaving the edges hard. If you want to convey that your hand is more youthful or feminine, you can blur these shapes a little more, and vice versa, more masculine, blur less. After you blurred out your hands a bit, the shadows might feel a little bit stiff, like each area is just one solid color, which can look a little weird. To fix this, take an airbrush tool and using the base color of your skin, go over the dark parts of your hand and lightly add a little gradient to the bottom of these shapes. This creates some kind of bounced lighting effect, and it also makes the colors more dynamic. After smoothing out the hand, you'll notice that it might have lost a little bit of its form. So a really good thing we can do is add some subtle lines to capture that illusion of volume. Lines are a very good way of giving a visual indicator of the form of an object. Imagine if I showed you a circle and then
That's my little brother.
my brain would then interpret it as a sphere instead. So the first lines we can draw are the creases of our hands. Just use a marker tool to draw where the creases are on your hand and blur the edges of it while leaving the middle hard. Another thing we can do is use a soft line art brush and use a blue color to lightly draw veins that also wrap around the form of the hand. And finally, the last lines we can emphasize are the tendons of our hands. Starting from the middle of the finger, draw a dark and light line side by side that points towards the center of your wrist. And this time, slightly blur all of it. This shows the viewer where the top of the hand is, which helps a lot with showing its volume. Finally, based on the age, gender, or body type of your character, you can now go back and emphasize any of these features of your hand. Use the liquify tool to make the finger stubbier or longer. Or add some cuts to show the form of the hand even more. Just have fun experimenting and figure out what works best for you. If you're a beginner who's looking for professional structured lessons to improve your art, and you want one-to-one guidance, consider joining my new art course on Instagram. I'm going to be posting weekly.
¿Qué pasa, papá?
No, me he dicho yo que el dedo.
¿Eh?
About art and helping you realize your fullest potential. Use the code artist to get 30% off the first month. This offer will last through July.
Imagínate por un momento de que has practicado todos los fundamentos, estás dibujando cada semana.
That art tutorial was really good.
Esos personajes sin fondo de historia.
¿Las has puesto a hablar swing o no?
Era inglés.
Pues parecía... No, ¿sabes qué parecía? Tuta, pica, tuta. Lo que habla ya va a dejar.
Empiezas a dibujar, no sabes cómo afrontar el papel en blanco y al final nos quedan resultados tan pobres como este aquí. ¿Cómo puedo solucionar este problema? ¿Te sientes identificado? Pues amigos y amigas, quedaos en este vídeo porque hoy vamos a conocer todos los secretos acerca de la composición. Y os prometo que si veis el vídeo completo vais a salir de aquí sabiendo cómo afrontar una ilustración tan compleja como esta de aquí. Soy Alex, ilustrador y concept artist profesional. Y ya son muchos los que me han comentado que les interesaría ver un vídeo completo y profesional acerca de todo lo relacionado con la composición, ya que es un tema que muchos pasan por alto cuando realmente es igual de importante o más que temas tan comunes como lo son la perspectiva y la anatomía. Así que para empezar, ¿cuáles son esos componentes de nuestras composiciones que hacen que un dibujo se vea visible? Pues esos son la narrativa, coloración, intención, color. Empezaremos por la narrativa, ya que está completamente de la mano de la composición y es lo que hace que nuestros dibujos cobren vida y tengan sentido. Una frase que os tenéis que grabar es que cada dibujo tiene que contar algo. ¿Y qué elementos son importantes para contar esa historia en tus dibujos? La expresión, la pose del personaje, pues realmente sí, pero ¿sabías que hay uno mucho más importante? Exacto. Tenéis que pensar que la composición no deja de ser el medio de transporte principal para las emociones. Es la forma gráfica e indirecta que utilizamos siempre para expresar una historia, un sentimiento o una situación. Y de eso los que más saben son los artistas de cómic y más especialmente los artistas de cómic. Al final son los encargados de trasladar un guión, un papel y hacer que una historia cobre vida, sentido y tenga imagen.
Como artista a nivel profesional con varios años de experiencia en el sector,
El permiso de los recados iré a la piscina de aquí.
¿Eh?
El permiso con los recados voy a la piscina, te mantengo informado.
Sí, porfa.
Pero pon sobre las 7:30, 8, ¿vale?
Vale. Es que has pillado la puerta abierta.
ya que recordemos,
Sí.
sin esta narrativa,
Teomori 117. Buenas tardes, ¿qué tal?
Es que has pillado a mi hermano saliendo por la puerta de casa.
más que seas una cámara viviente o un
Casi, o sea, ya se asustó. Que ya canjeó un susto.
directamente al entendimiento de quien lo vea y no tanto en lo espectacular que se pueda ver en un primer momento. Y aquí podríamos encontrar el técnico que todos ya conocemos de que una imagen vale más que 100 palabras y es que no encuentro mejor forma de describir el trabajo de un artista con storyboard que no sea con esta frase.
Teniendo en cuenta lo que nos ha comentado Aida, creo que ahora ya veis mejor la importancia que tiene la narrativa en nuestras composiciones y en nuestros dibujos. Pero Alex, yo ya sé compositor, incluso he visto muchos dibujos que me enseñan la teoría, pero es que no tengo manera de ponerlo a aplicar en mis propias obras. Pues tranquilo, porque para hacer las ilustraciones tan épicas que hace Aida, debemos tener en cuenta los otros pilares que he comentado al principio del vídeo. Así que una vez tengáis en mente vuestra historia, sepáis lo que queréis hacer e incluso podáis tener un mood board más o menos a mano,
Teomori 117. Qué micro tan bueno, casi que puedo escuchar hasta cada paso en esa casa.
Es... Tiene filtro de ruidos, lo prometo.
Thank you, San. Hola, Teo.
Hola cielo, ¿qué tal?
colocarlo en el centro del lienzo. En vez de eso, intentaremos hacerlo un poco más
Thank you, San.
interesante colocándolo un poco más
XD.
abajo, más arriba, e incluso si queréis podéis inclinarlo un poco para hacerlo más dinámico y más tenso, dependiendo de lo que queráis hacer. Todo esto va a generar mucho más interés y mucho más balance en nuestra imagen, pero también debéis entender que una imagen con una buena composición necesita de equilibrio. Es decir, si tenemos este lienzo y queremos distribuir estas formas por toda la imagen, deberemos evitar cargar solamente un lado, ya que, como veis en la balanza, mientras que el lado izquierdo tiene mucha sobrecarga de información, en la derecha no hay nada, está completamente vacío y desbalanceado. Mientras que si lo distribuimos bien y de forma ordenada, veremos que ahora todo estará mucho más balanceado y por ende será todo mucho más agradable a la vista. Comentado esto, vamos a ver estas dos imágenes de aquí. Si os fijáis bien, cada una os generará una sensación distinta, pero a la vez todas ellas han aplicado la teoría de los tercios. Entonces, ¿cómo hacen para verse tan distintas entre ellas si al final la teoría y la base son las mismas? Pues justamente porque aplican lo que he comentado antes. Si tenemos un personaje pequeñito, hacemos un paisaje enorme y amplio. Aparte, si os fijáis, no hay diagonales, por lo que al utilizar líneas rectas aún se va a exagerar más esa sensación de paz y armonía. Y finalmente, el tamaño de las cosas. Si hacemos que el paisaje ocupe el 90% de la ilustración y el personaje solo un 10%, ¿adivináis qué elemento es más importante? Si esto mismo lo comparamos con la siguiente, veremos que, aunque comparten la regla de los tercios, utiliza justamente los recursos gráficos contrarios. Al haber tantas diagonales, el dibujo se vuelve mucho más dinámico y mucho más tenso, y el personaje principal, al estar rodeado por todos lados de elementos secundarios, se genera una sensación de agobio, amenaza y peligro. Encima, al no haber prácticamente fondo, destacan mucho más los dos personajes que vemos en pantalla, empezando por el monstruo que está en grande y finalizando con el personaje que se siente amenazado y que justamente se sitúa debajo del lienzo, mostrando aún más esa sensación de inferioridad y de debilidad. Y dicho esto, pasaremos al tercer punto, que para mí es el más interesante y el más importante de todos. Pero antes, quiero recordar que el 90% de la gente que ve mis vídeos no está suscrita, por lo que agradecería de corazón que le deis al botón y aparte activaréis la campanita para saber cuándo subo muchos más vídeos como estos de aquí. Continuando con lo de antes, el tercer punto que quería comentar antes es que debéis aprender a darle intención a vuestras obras. ¿Pero qué quiero decir con esto? Pues básicamente es aprender a guiar al espectador por todo tu dibujo, controlar su mente y decirle con tan solo 2 segundos qué parte del dibujo quieres que vea, con qué orden y por qué. Para crear un buen recorrido visual, yo recomendaría que siempre tengáis en cuenta que en la imagen debe haber un punto de interés principal y todo lo secundario deberá estar ahí no solo para decorar la imagen, sino para ayudar a que ese foco principal destaque por encima de todo. Para hacer esto yo me ayudo de formas, trazos, perspectiva, colores y contrastes. Vamos a tomar como ejemplo este dibujo de aquí, que bajo mi opinión tiene una composición chulísima. Para la perspectiva tenéis que imaginaros que las líneas de aguja son como flechas. Estas nos van a indicar qué quieren que veas primero. En este caso
Sí,
vemos como claramente
flechas indirectas son.
igual que lo hacen los cuervos con su mirada. Y luego también lo podéis hacer con trazos, ya que como podéis ver en los ejemplos que estoy poniendo ahora, las mismas pinceladas fugan hacia la dirección de interés de la cámara.
Vamos a trabajar así.
Luego, con los contrastes sucede exactamente lo mismo. Normalmente yo recomendaría jugar con los primeros planos, metiéndolos más oscuros y con menos contraste, y hacer la zona importante de la imagen mucho más brillante, contrastada e iluminada. Y finalmente el color. A mí una cosa que me gusta es resaltar las partes importantes con colores vibrantes, saturados y cálidos, mientras que las zonas más secundarias suelo ponerlas en un tono mucho más apagado y mucho más frío. Ah, y una cosa que también os va a ayudar es a que detalléis más las zonas importantes y que hagáis todo mucho más suelto en las zonas menos interesantes. De esta forma estaréis ganando tiempo y encima vais a generar una especie de desenfoque gaussiano hecho a base de pinceladas. Dicho esto, para ponerlo en práctica vamos a hacer un ejercicio todos juntos. Quiero que empecéis buscando una historia o una frase. En mi caso he pensado con esta de aquí. Una vez sepáis lo que queréis contar con vuestro dibujo, vamos a buscar algunas referencias. Yo os recomiendo que lo separéis por temáticas. Estas pueden ser imágenes que os gusten por la composición que utilizan, otras por el color y así con todo lo que os parezca interesante. Y bueno, no voy a profundizar hoy en cómo se hace un buen mood board y tampoco cómo se puede crear una ilustración paso a paso desde cero. Pero si os interesa y os gustaría verlo, dejadme un like y comentádmelo aquí abajo, en los comentarios. Y dicho esto, pasaremos a la segunda parte del ejercicio. Una vez tengáis las referencias, quiero que tratéis de dibujar 3 bocetos rápidos. Esto os va a ayudar a plantear mejor las ilustraciones y a trabajar rápido para generar muchas ideas y no fijarnos tanto en que quede bonito. Una vez lo tengáis, quiero que, en otra capa, empecéis a colocar algunos tonos muy básicos para generar interés y terminar de destacar el personaje. Ah, y no hagáis tampoco muchos difuminados. Yo trataría mejor de hacer 4 o 5 tonos básicos con un pincel duro y si luego queréis, podéis darle una representación.
¡Los zapatos!
Aquí es donde todo lo que hemos comentado a lo largo de este vídeo. ¿Dónde va la línea del horizonte? Hacia
Que se despierta.
escenario, cómo se sitúa la perspectiva, cuál es el foco de interés, entre muchas otras cosas. Como he comentado antes, en este vídeo solo quiero que dibujéis estos dibujos en pequeñito, que no terminéis todas las ilustraciones de vídeos de anatomía. Aquí lo que os interesa es aprender a componer una
Almaeico. Snap Time in Spain.
Si podéis hacer este ejercicio una vez a la semana, veréis que a lo largo del tiempo vais a ganar mucha confianza y las composiciones os van a salir solas. Coméntame si te interesa un vídeo de fondos y si veo mucha gente pidiéndolo, voy a subir un segundo vídeo
Thank you, San. XDD. Almaeico. La familia dragona ha estado mirda.
Recordad que si queréis haceros miembros del canal, por tan solo 3 euros al mes podéis acceder a contenido exclusivo, correcciones personalizadas, acceso a directos privados, mentorías y mucho más. Espero que os haya gustado este vídeo, y si queréis reforzar mucho más aún vuestro conocimiento artístico, os dejo por aquí un vídeo de anatomía donde vais a aprender cómo hacer paso a paso todas las caras y todos los rostros para vuestros personajes, tanto para estilo realista como para después aplicarlo en vuestro estilo personal. Nos vemos al siguiente vídeo, nos vemos por ahí.
Si como a mí el buen tiempo te da ganas de comer más variado sin complicarte, HelloFresh es tu solución. Los productos son buenísimos, de agricultores y granjas locales, y las instrucciones facilísimas. Y en solo 15 minutos tendrás todo listo para poder disfrutar de platos tan brutales como este pollo teriyaki. Así que si tú también quieres un pequeño reset este verano, prueba HelloFresh desde 2,60 por ración y con envíos gratis.
Prosigue. ¿Qué decías?
Veréis, Majestad, el pueblo está sufriendo y parecerá una tontería, pero cuando era pequeña mis padres y yo recogíamos manzanas, hacíamos tartas con ellas y salíamos a la ciudad.
Las tartas son un lujo, no necesitan lujos. Eso los confunde.
Pero a veces un pequeño detalle, algo dulce, te recuerda que hay algo más en la vida que simplemente subsistir.
Madre mía.
Sinceramente, no recordaba que fueras tan obstinada.
Perdonad, siento...
¿Qué es esto?
necesitan bondad.
¿Qué es esto? Oh, Dios mío.
To drop a new rendering tutorial, and they call me Pookie. That's all you need to do to get me going. Please don't spam Pookie in the comments. You know, Pookie means something else in Indonesia. It's pussycat without the cat. Anyway, so the first thing to do is, of course, prepare your sketch. I usually draw a cleaner sketch on top of the rough one because my rough sketch doesn't look like anything. So, what does sketching have to do with rendering? Well, nothing. It's completely optional. There are some giga chats out there who can render from literally blobs of color. But to make my life easier, I will stick with sketching. I tried rendering without a sketch once. It gave me nightmares. By the way, does this hand look yaoi enough to you? Now you can't render without the base color, but it's such a tedious process, so we're just gonna fast forward. I add all the base colors in one layer because I'm not an organized person and my brain gets overwhelmed with too many layers. I don't want to burn my brain before we even start rendering. Anyway, I start with muted colors first because they're easier to control and not hurt my old aging retinas. Same reason why I always use gray backgrounds, because white burns my eyes. I follow the reference, but I also ran the airbrush across the middle of the face for that cute blushing maiden look. Even though I'm currently drawing a strong man with gluteus muscle thick enough to play bongos on, I show he blushes from time to time. By the way, in case it's not obvious enough, even though I call this a rendering tutorial, actually it's just how I usually do it, in my own style. Lately we've I've been exploring Xiaohongshu a lot on this channel, and there are some changes in my rendering method and art style. I'm switching to flat watercolor opaque to apply the hard shadows. I always start with the darkest areas on the skin since it has big shapes and are easiest to see. I shade it flatly at first, like cell shading, focusing on the big shapes. Generally, the skin shading contains many triangles, for example on the eyes, nose, under the lips, under the chin, and also the neck. Afterwards, I started adding the midtones, or the middle shadow, or whatever you want to call it. They're lighter, softer shadows that
O como te dé la gana llamarlos. La mierda esa.
You'll find them on the cheekbones, forehead, and nose bridge.
Mirad, deditos juntos.
Watercolor opaque to do this, but with an even lower opacity. The beauty of this brush is the faded tip, so you can get both soft and hard edges with just one brush. You just have to adjust the opacity and the pen pressure on your screen. By the way, for the shadows, I'm using a multiply layer for both soft
Thank
and
you,
hard
San.
shadows. Multiply
XDDD.
makes any color darker and a bit more saturated, which is why I always use muted colors with a hint of red. I always spend too much time working on the skin that I don't even take the hair and glow shading seriously. Yes, I know, this is supposed to be a rendering video, but I yap about these other things. But like, these are the foundation of the painting before we paint over the sketch and refine it. Also, imagine if I started the video with this half-painted Risley on the canvas. People would start asking questions like, how did it get to that? Or, why did you skip so many steps? And blah blah blah. Okay, maybe I'm thinking too much. Now we can paint over the sketch. Yay, we're finally rendering. I have merged all my layers after I duplicated them, of course, not taking any chances. And this is just a habit of mine. I always start with rendering the nose first. I don't know why. Some people work from top to bottom or rendering the painting as a whole, but I always start with the nose. If I don't get the nose right, I can't work on anything else. Pay attention to the midtones as you paint. A lot of beginners aren't very confident in adding midtones because they can look too dark or the colors don't blend well. Now there are two methods I use for midtones. First, using a low opacity brush to apply the midtones and increase it gradually. Second, still with a low opacity brush, swipe the dark color onto the base and take the resulting color as the midtone. Don't forget to combine it with dark shadows for more dimension and volume. You can use smudge or blur tool to blend, but I prefer using low opacity brush so I can maintain that painterly texture. Sometimes I do use smudge for bigger areas like the cheek for a smoother blend. Recently, I'm trying to be quicker when rendering hair, not necessarily to save time, but to keep myself from overthinking. All I have to keep in mind is make a Hyundai logo as I'm rendering and use a big brush so I don't overthink the details. I will still add details, but not right now. So I got a lot of questions on how to paint over the sketch, and like, isn't that pretty self-explanatory? You paint over the sketch. Okay, but seriously though, I think what they meant was how to do that without the painting losing its definition. I do paint over my sketch, but I redraw my sketch afterwards and make it tidier. I do this especially to the face, so the facial features don't...
Otra cosa que puedes hacer es que te guardas la... Uy, perdona. Te guardas la capa de la línea o del boceto aparte y así luego la puedes poner por encima otra vez.
I figured it out because I used it for this Risley painting. And okay, let me explain it by using the lips, okay, because I just got it when I was rendering the lips. So the idea is to give a 3D look to the painting, so we should see the lips like this, like a 3D topology or something, which looks complicated, but bear with me a little. By knowing how it folds, it's easier to shape the shadows, where to make it darker, and how the shadow gradually gets lighter. It takes some practice to the drawing as 3D objects, but it's fine. Always have a reference ready because it helps so much. I recommend looking for black and white photos because they normally have good light and shadow contrast, so it's easier to map out the big shapes of shadow. Let's get back to the hair project. I focused on building the big shapes before, but now the hair is losing its definition, which is normal. Do not hesitate to redraw the hair or even add some line art. I like sharp looking hair with clear texture, and since Ryo has dark hair, I used pure black to redraw the hair. By the way, if you're rendering in one layer like me, always work from the bottom to the top. For example, his eyes and eyebrows are covered with bangs, so draw the full eyes and eyebrows first, then paint the bangs. Also, don't forget to zoom out. I'm zooming in and out many times in my painting to check if anything's out of place, because we can get too consumed in rendering and blending, and then boom, the eyes are in different postal codes. I'm not gonna go into much details about rendering close because I don't know what I'm doing either, and it's gonna get covered by the hand anyway, so why bother, right? I'll render it just enough that it doesn't look weird. For the hand, I'm going to use the method from Black Sister like before, so the hand looks more realistic and 3D. It's very important to get the anatomy right before rendering, which I didn't do. I just sketched it, following the reference. It looks fine from way far away, and then I jumped straight into coloring, and now I pay the price. Same with the hair, do not hesitate to redraw it if you think it looks weird. Thankfully, I drew the hand on a different layer so it's easier to fix. I also decided to be bolder with my brush strokes. I use high opacity brush more and blend less to get that oil painting look. I also line art the hand to quickly draw details like the nails and knuckles. Painting's 80% done, so now I'm adding small details like the eyelashes, tear ducts, highlights, and small shadows from the hair tips. Don't forget to add shadow coming from the hand. I use multiply layer on top of the original painting so it won't mess with all my hard work. Now we go to filter, click hue and saturation, and adjust the colors and saturation to your liking. I also use brightness and contrast to adjust the brightness and contrast. Turn your painting into grayscale to see if it has good contrast. If you can see the shadows clearly, then you need to up the contrast, muchacho. With an overlay layer, I'm adding more red to the painting. This is optional, or you can use any color you like. I love red, and I like seeing Ryo blush. It's like he's drunk from drinking all that tea, or constipated from the tea. Lately, I love using the hidden colors method Chinese artists use. I have a dedicated video on that, so check that out. But basically, we're adding color variation without ruining the contrast. If you've seen artists adding blue or purple to the skin and it makes the drawing look more interesting, this is basically that. To do so, you need to pick a shade of blue or purple that has similar value with the shadow. If the shadow is dark, don't apply light colors on top of it because they have different values. I applied it the same way I made midtone so it looks natural. If you forgot how it's done, jump back a couple of minutes. You forgetful little shit. I like to apply these hidden colors on the shadow so they don't look too strong. There's another way to do it on Procreate. Duplicate layer, open curves, act like a crazy person, change the blending mode to color, lower the opacity, and erase the colors on the face. Boom, now you have pink and green on the skin as well. Lastly, I use the Unsharp Mask filter on Ibis Paint to sharpen the painting. Yes, the name's quite ironic. Why would you name it ironically like that? Couldn't you just name it Sharp Mask? I don't think anyone's gonna complain if you name it Sharp Mask. I mean, it's raising a lot of questions because you name it Unsharp Mask. Is it like an inside joke among developers or... Alright, I'm just gonna end the video here before I spiral into whatever that was. Sorry about that. My melatonin pills just kicked in. Okay, good night.
Good night, I guess. Oh.
Hello, I'm Blue, and in today's video I'll show you how to color and render skin. Skin is probably my favorite thing to color and render because it's so soft and malleable, and there's not a lot of rules to it like there are for clothing or for hair. So I feel like there's a lot more freedom to kind of render skin the way you want to. I don't know, there's just something about red hand skin and then making it look so like yum. So first thing we'll do is the whys, and then we'll get to the how-tos. Before we dive in, I'm excited to share this video is sponsored by teach a wide range of classes, from photography and graphic design to music, cooking, business, marketing, lifestyle, and much, much more. There's something for everyone. One thing I've been wanting to improve is my ability to capture likeness of people in portraits. I love the people in my life, and the idea of creating drawings that capture precious moments is special to me. So the class I've been taking is Digital Painting in Photoshop, Create a Stylized Portrait by Melissa D. Nobrega. She covers interesting topics like value scaling, painting tips, and stylization techniques. Her explanations are easy to follow along, and I definitely recommend her classes. Another class I really love and highly recommend is Digital Painting Concept Landscapes by Jonas DeReo. It's so good, with loads of easy-to-follow advice on drawing landscapes from thumbnailing to composition. There's so much good art advice on the platform. I highly recommend it if you're looking to get better at art. Skillshare offers learning paths as well, which is a collection of classes carefully selected to be taken step by step. Each class builds on what you've already learned, reinforcing the lessons. They cover various levels of experience, from beginners to advanced, including topics like design, productivity, creativity, freelancing, and so much more. So if you don't know where to start, Skillshare's learning paths are for you. So stop saying I want to and turn those I want to's into I made it happen. Whether you're pursuing hobbies or aiming to turn your skills into a career, start investing in yourself this year with Skillshare. Skillshare has thousands of classes covering virtually every skill imaginable. Skillshare is giving away 1 month free to the first 500 viewers to use them in the description box. I highly recommend taking advantage of this opportunity if you're eager for easy and enjoyable learning. Big thank you to Skillshare again for their continued support. Now let's dive into the video. There are many different skin tones with varying colors and shading and blush types to use, but you can use the method that I'm going to show you for any type of skin color, including the unnatural ones. So most skin colors about here. The reason it leans towards the warmer tones is due to the blood being underneath the skin. So this means that skin tones and blushes will often have a warmer undertone. I add this and I call it blush. So when you add blush to the skin, it makes it more lifelike and adds more of that rosy tint to it. I pick the base color of the skin tone and then I shift the hue to a bit more of a red or pinker color. Even with the darker skin tones, all I do is shift the saturation to a bit more of a lighter red color. When I'm picking shading colors for the skin, I prefer shifting the colors down to purple and maroons. I use 2 different saturations and hues when picking the shading. So I'll have the base shading, which will probably be the purple or maroon, and then I'll shift the saturation down 1 to make it a bit darker. I'll use these 2 different colors in different sections of the skin. If you look nicely, you can see the 2 different shading colors I used in these 2 pictures. When light hits the skin, it catches the blood cells, making them appear redder. This is called subsurface scattering, and I add this when I color. So how I do this is I will add a bit more of a darker red, outlining the shading. This is kind of playing on the fact that there are red blood cells underneath the skin and the light is catching it. The second type of shading I add is called a reflective light. Adding a reflective light to the skin can enhance its depth. I like using colors from the opposite side of the color wheel, such as blues and greens, to create striking contrast. So then we have highlights. Highlights should be in the same color but with a higher saturation. Now this is just how I do it. If you'd like to get better at it on your own, I would suggest doing skin studies, so redrawing actual skin from references like photos or from screenshots, and also look into studying how other artists do it, so redrawing the artist's artwork and observing what they do. There's this really neat thing called the flash cubes done by this artist, which I'm sure you'll have seen before in the past. They're great for finding skin tones and then finding shading and highlight colors that suit the skin tone. The thing with skin color is it is rarely ever the same color twice. The environment can drastically affect the skin tone and shading. For instance, a character in a forest might have greenish hues reflecting on their skin, while one near the ocean might have a bit more bluish or warmer colors depending on where they sit. So just because you're using the flash cube for examples doesn't mean that they will always stay the same color. So just a tip I'd like to point is that with lighter skin, you focus more on the blush and the redness to create form. But I noticed when I'm drawing darker skin, I tend to focus more on the highlights to really show the shape of the face. So I will use like a lighter color to show where the rounding of the cheeks are or where the face basically bends. I think it's because this darker skin tends to catch more light than the lighter skin. Also, darker skinned people normally have lighter palms and lighter underneath their feet, so I just wanted to point that out. If you're going in and rendering a darker skinned hand, just keep that in mind. Highlights in the face can really define the facial features, so when I'm rendering a face, I tend to add the highlights to places to kind of show depth. So, for example, I would add a highlight by the eyes or under the eyes to kind of show the eye bags. Or if I'm rendering a hand, I'll add highlight between the knuckles to show that like it has like a bit of an elevated surface. So that's just something I wanted to mention before I get into the examples. Now let's get into the fun part. I will do a step-by-step guide on a piece on how I'm rendering skin. So for this, I will be doing different skin tones for examples, but I won't be making extreme environment changes, so they'll mostly be based on like regular environmental skin tones. So first thing I do is I add the base color, which is the regular base tone. You can make use of our Lord and Savior, the flesh cubes, if you're unsure which skin tone to pick, or you can just go with the color wheel if you're confident enough that you're picking the right hues. So once I have the base color down, I will start adding the blush. So I add the blush to parts of the body where the skin is more thinner, such as under the eyes, the nose, the cheeks, the ears, the lips, the elbows, basically any part of the body that ends in like a point. So shoulders, knees, ankles, you get my point. Then I also use blush to create depth. For example, if I'm drawing muscles, I will use the blush color to define the shape and depth of the muscle. Or if I'm drawing the back, I will use the blush to define where the back crease is. It's really good to add more depth into it. When I'm drawing hands, I use the blush to show where the knuckles are. I use it to create depth in the body parts. I also add blush to rounded pieces. So if I'm drawing like an arm, I will add like a thin blurred out line of blush next to the side to show that the arm is round. Next thing I do is I add shading based on the light source. I pick the shading colors, which is either going to be a maroon or a reddish color, and then I add it with a light OBC foil. So then I have two different shading colors. I have a darker maroon and then a lighter maroon, and then I just kind of play with the two of them until they kind of work out. Sometimes I'll use a lasso tool and just airbrush in like the lighter color into the shading, but that's only when I'm feeling really fancy. Now do note that the shading colors can change depending on the environment. All of these colors can change depending on the environment, so just keep in mind where your character is. But if I'm just doing like a basic flat color, I normally just do with red or maroons. So for this piece, I didn't actually add reflective light. I'll go in and add that at the end because I actually forgot. So what I do instead is I add a lighter color to where some of the creases are, and I feel like that really defines where the crease is. So you can see by her back or the knees or his neck, I add a lighter color to show that there's a crease. So that's kind of like a reflective light as well. Whoops, spoilers, but here is the finished piece, and here is where I would add the reflective light if I did go in and add it into these examples. I think it was because I was using a reference for all of these, so and my brain did think like, oh, I should be adding different colors into it. But yeah, so here's where I've added them. It's normally a light purple or a light green color that I add.
Dios mío. Ah.
So after I've added everything to the drawing, what I like to do is go in with an overlay layer and the airbrush, and then I take a pinker, lighter color and I just splotch it over the face area. It kind of just brightens up the face and makes it more
Vale, chicos, me voy a ir porque me reclaman. No sé si podría hacer directito luego a la noche, pero muchas gracias por pasaros este ratito corto que hemos estado en directo. Así que un besito. Disculpad, el directo ha sido súper corto, que llego a casa bien tarde y es lo que hay, es lo que hay, es lo que hay.
Thank you, San. Ouki descansa
Me
rico.
está gustando cómo me está quedando esto. Tengo ganas de seguir. Un besazo enorme, nos vemos. Chao, chao. Muchas gracias, Teo, por
Me
pasarte
está costando
también.
hacer unas plumas XD.
Plumas. Estamos todos con plumas. Si le tuviéramos plumas, nos sería más fácil saber cómo hacer las plumas. Un besito. Chao, chao.
Thank you, San. Y cena rico.
Igualmente, Chilo. Chao, chao.
Thank you, San. Si está quedando